It's the summer of 1914. Europe is in the middle of what they call the Belle Epoque, the beautiful era. It's a time of peace, incredible progress, and optimism. But just under that glittering surface, a tangled web of rivalries and secret alliances is about to snap, dragging the entire globe into a conflict so brutal they would call it the Great War.
Before we get into the how or the why, you have to start with this number, 20 million. Just try to wrap your head around that for a second. 20 million dead, soldiers and civilians. It's a number so huge, so horrifying, it's almost meaningless. But it's the key to understanding everything that follows. It's the scar the war left on the entire 20th century.
So how did the world get here? How does a single gunshot in a city most people had never heard of trigger a global catastrophe? Well, to make sense of it all, we're going to break it down into 5 key parts. We'll look at the spark, the belief that it would all be over quickly, how it spread across the globe, how it finally ended, and the new world it left behind.
All right, first up, the powder keg explodes. We all hear about the assassination that started it all, right? But how does one single event lead to a world war? Well, the truth is, it didn't happen in a vacuum. For decades, Europe had been turning itself into a powder keg, just waiting for a match.
Think of Europe at this time like a neighborhood with 2 rival gangs. You had the Triple Alliance, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy on one side, and the Triple Entente, France, Britain, and Russia on the other. They were all locked into these ironclad promises that if one of them got into a fight, everyone had to jump in. At the same time, you've got this insane naval arms race between Britain and Germany building bigger and badder battleships. Nationalism is boiling over, especially in the Balkans. And maybe the most dangerous part of all, people weren't really afraid of war. Leaders saw it as just another tool you could use to get what you wanted, a truly perfect storm.
And then, the match is lit. June 28th, Archduke Franz Ferdinand is assassinated. And from there, it's just a cascade of dominoes falling, one after another so fast no one could stop it. Austria-Hungary blames Serbia and declares war. Russia, who sees itself as Serbia's protector, starts mobilizing its massive army. Germany sees Russia mobilizing and declares war on them. Then, Germany declares war on Russia's ally, France. And the final domino? To get to France, Germany invades neutral Belgium, and that forces Britain to declare war on Germany. Just like that, in a little over a month, the entire continent is at war.
So the war is on. And you'd think people would be terrified, right? Not at all. It was the total opposite, which brings us to our next part, the illusion of a short war. The famous phrase everyone was saying was, home before the leaves fall. They thought it would be a quick, glorious adventure. Oh man, they had no idea what was coming.
I mean, listen to this. This is the German Kaiser himself telling his troops they'll be home before autumn. And he wasn't alone. That was the feeling everywhere. In London, Paris, Berlin, crowds were cheering in the streets, throwing flowers at soldiers marching off to what they truly believed would be a grand adventure. The universal thinking was, it'll all be over by Christmas.
But the war they expected, and the war they got, could not have been more different. They all planned for a fast, mobile war with decisive battles, kind of like the wars of the 19th century. But Germany's master plan for a quick knockout of France, the Schlieffen Plan, failed. It was stopped cold at the Battle of the Marne. And at that moment, the war of movement died. The reality became a static, brutal war of attrition, dominated by new weapons like machine guns and heavy artillery. Both sides just started digging in.
And this is what they created: trench warfare. This became the defining, hellish reality of the Western Front. Imagine a giant, zigzagging scar of muddy ditches stretching for 475 miles from the North Sea to the Swiss Alps. You're living in filth, with rats, disease, and the constant thunder of artillery. Between you and the enemy is no man's land, a wasteland of craters and barbed wire. And the only tactic was to blow a whistle and have thousands of men climb over the top to run straight into machine gun fire. It was absolute madness. Now, while that nightmare was unfolding in France and Belgium, it's easy to forget that this wasn't just a European war. This thing was spilling over borders, oceans, and continents. This brings us to part 3, a war on all fronts. This conflict went global, and it went global fast.
Yeah, the Western Front is the one we always see in the movies. But at the very same time, massive armies were clashing on the huge Eastern Front with Russia. Then new fronts opened up. Italy joined the war, fighting in the freezing Alps. The Ottoman Empire jumped in, sparking battles from Gallipoli to the deserts of Mesopotamia. The war was even being fought in German colonies in Africa and the Pacific, and all across the oceans with submarines and dreadnoughts. It was, in every single sense of the phrase, a world war.
So, fast forward to 1917. After 3 solid years of this relentless slaughter, every single nation is on the verge of collapse. The armies are exhausted, the people back home are starving. Something had to give. And this brings us to the beginning of the end, collapse and conclusion. 1917 was the year that would change everything.
2 game-changing events happen. First, Germany gets desperate and its U-boats start sinking any ship heading for Britain, which finally pushes the United States to declare war. At the same time, Russia completely falls apart in the Bolshevik Revolution and officially drops out of the war. Now this sets up an incredible, high-stakes race against time. Germany moves all its troops from the east for one last massive go-for-broke offensive to win the war before the Americans can arrive in large numbers. And they came so close. But the Allies held on. And then, with fresh American troops pouring in, they launched their own counteroffensive, the 100 Days Offensive, that finally broke the back of the German army. On the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918, Germany signed the Armistice. The fighting was over.
The guns fell silent. But the impact of the war? That was just beginning. This wasn't just the end of a conflict, it was the end of an entire world. Let's take a look at how everything was remade in the aftermath.
I mean, just let this sink in. Four massive empires that had dominated the world map for centuries, the German, the Austro-Hungarian, the Russian, and the Ottoman, were just gone, wiped away in 4 years. The maps of Europe and the Middle East had to be completely redrawn, creating a bunch of new countries, many of them on very unstable ground from the get-go.
And the human cost, as we said at the start, was just unimaginable. These numbers are hard to even look at. You're talking about an entire generation of young men wiped out. The ones who did survive were forever changed, forever scarred. They became known as the lost generation, and that psychological wound, that trauma, would haunt Europe for decades to come.
In the end, they called it the war to end all wars. But the peace treaty they created, the Treaty of Versailles, was deeply flawed. It put all the blame on Germany and slammed them with crippling financial penalties, creating this deep, burning resentment. And that bitterness turned out to be the perfect soil for extremism to grow. So tragically, the war that was supposed to end all wars didn't. Instead, it lit the fuse for an even bigger, even deadlier world war just 20 years down the road.